rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I want to welcome you to Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I know it's extremely hot down here in Dallas. If you're anywhere in the Metroplex, or really anywhere in the South, you'll know what I'm talking about. But wherever you are, I hope the Lord is blessing you and keeping His hands upon you, and that's our prayer every day. So I thank you for joining me today, and we've got a very special program lined up for you today. We're going to be telling the story of Endtime Ministries. Of course, Endtime Ministries specializes in the prophecies of the Bible, and we use current events daily to show you how prophecies written 2,000 to 2,500 years ago are coming to pass right now, letting us know that we are just ahead of, or just prior to, the second coming of Jesus Christ. We are truly living in the end time. And God has really called this ministry for the end time. He called Irvin Baxter years ago, and what you see on the television, the radio, listen to us on the radio, read on the web, the magazine, however you get the outreach arm from End Time, you see Irvin and myself and a lot of different ones writing articles and teaching different lessons, and we're all focused on prophecy. But there is so much to this ministry that you don't really see a lot of times, and it's so rich. There's so much God has done for us over the years, and we want to share that part with you today. Now, I did a program about 3 or 4 months ago where I went just over a bunch of miracles that God has done for us over the years, to let you know that this is a God-called, Spirit-led ministry. But I have a special guest on the program with me today. This is my wife, Jana Robbins. This is Irvin's daughter. And she's going to be filling in a lot of gaps that I left out in the original program. And you know, us men sometimes, Jan, we just hit the treetops on things. But if you want detail, you go to a lady.
That's right.
And so consequently, I wanted to bring you on today because really, you've been here since the beginning.
Pretty much.
And you're Irvin's daughter, and so you know him better than most. And so I wanted to bring you on today because the goal of this program is to tell the story of Endtime Ministries. It's such a miraculous event that has happened over the years by God. So many miraculous events have taken place. And so that's what we wanted to do today, was to tell the story of End Time. And I've had so many people, one of the main questions that we get here at Endtime Ministries is that you guys say we're in the end time. You say we're going through the tribulation. How are we going to make it through that time? And my answer to them is not, how much money do you have in the bank? It's not, what's your pedigree? How much degrees do you have? Because it won't be your intellect that you can rely on, or money. You're going to have to learn to be led by the Spirit of God. And we realized that early on, that in getting through the times and navigating the troubled waters that are just ahead from now to the second coming of Jesus Christ, we've got to be Spirit-led individuals. It's how the apostles made it through under the reign of a world government in the New Testament. And that's how we're going to make it through in the times just ahead. So, in telling the story and introducing our audience to Endtime Ministries, the background, really, how have we got to where we're at now? Now everybody sees us on TV and the magazine, they listen to us on the radio, but how did we get there? That's what a lot of people want to know, and they don't get that by watching us in the media. So, to start off with, let's talk about your dad, Irvin Baxter. Of course, he's the president, the CEO of Endtime Ministries, and this whole thing revolves around him because God called him into this ministry at a very young age. So can you fill me in on that? How did your dad get called into a ministry 50 plus years ago?
As a young man, he heard a lot of visiting ministers come through his parents' church. And one time when he was 19 years of age, a visiting minister came through his dad's church and shared the story that he believed that the four-headed beast was the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Really?
My dad has enough intellect to know that sounded a little bit off, but I think it was God tricking him into having a love for prophecy, because what it did is his intellectual mind made him go back in the next 30 days and read the book of Revelation through 19 times, which I believe was the beginning of a deep seed that was put in his spirit and his soul and his heart. And then it created what you see today, ultimately. And I just think that God knew that, and when that moment happened, that was really the beginning of Endtime Ministries, even though it didn't come to fruition until in the late 80s. And so that's how it all began.
So as a result of that, early on, your dad started evangelizing, and he took a church and a lot of different things at a young age. But as he got towards maybe 35, 40 years old, and God showed him America and the modern nations in the Bible, and he started teaching that early on. And the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, and the prophecies that would follow after that. So once these prophecies started happening, God started revealing them to your dad, and your dad started teaching about them and a lot of different things and was revealing prophecy to him. But there came a time when he said he kind of cut it off, and that's when his first book came about. So can you give me some background on what really launched Endtime Ministry?
Well, like you said, he gotten a lot of prophecies over the years and understandings, and he just assumed that they would always be there, that God would always keep giving him that. And he noticed after a while that it had sort of quit coming to him. So he got down to pray and he asked the Lord, Lord, what's going on? Why am I not getting any of these prophecies? He said it was like, I've heard him say it. If I've heard him say it once, I've heard him say it 1,000 times. It's like there was a faucet that was turned off. So he questioned God, and God told him, until you write these prophecies and share them with others, you're not getting anything else. So that put him on a quest to write his first book, which ultimately, after a 12-day of non-eating, of him and my mother together as a team, he put out this book, at which point he couldn't get anybody to publish it, but he self-published it because he had perseverance, and he distributed it. He traveled from church to church and place to place and told people about it, which they all thought he was crazy because, you know, here's a man who says he thinks that the Bible talks about the United States and modern nations in the Bible, and that the Berlin Wall is the deadly wound that's going to be healed. Nobody had ever even heard of that. And then the Berlin Wall is from the Cold War. And here is a man that's saying, well, God showed him in Scripture that the Berlin Wall was the deadly wound that was going to be healed. So that created the book, which he wrote and produced in '86. Then in '89, you know what happened. The world event that happened that stunned the whole world when they said, Mr. Gorbachev, if you really want peace, tear down this wall. And Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev and the Pope were in cahoots together. They got it done. And that's really when people started, I remember the day, the time where his phone would not stop. And this was before the day of cell phones. We're talking landline phones. And ring, 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 and he would be answering on the phone all day, all day, all day. How did you know this? How did you know 3 years ago to write in a book that there was going to, such a huge world event was going to happen as the wall coming down? And he said, the Lord had showed it to him over the years. He had this understanding of Scripture. So that is really what launched Endtime Ministries. Ultimately, we ended up starting the magazine in 1991. But the book that he wrote, which is A Message for the President, this is one of the original copies that he wrote in 1986, is where he stated that the modern nations was in the Bible, the Berlin Wall was going to come down, the Germans would reunite, the New World Order would be ushered in, and the peace process would begin. Well, that started the whole wild ride that we have today, Endtime Ministries.
Exactly. Wow. That's an awesome story. And I've told so many people about that book that he wrote about the Berlin Wall being torn down in 86, and then when it was torn down in 89, they're like, whoa, hold on. When did he write that book? And I'm like, it was published in 86.
Yeah.
And of course, they want to know how he knew that. And of course, then we go back to the prophecies of the Bible and the different things. So that was really a miracle from God. That wasn't Irvin Baxter's intellect. That was a miracle from God revealing that to him. And of course, it's all in Scripture, and everybody that follows our ministry knows about, you know, many of the other prophecies in the Bible because of what God has revealed to Irvin Baxter. So it was really a miraculous event, and it was a kind of a neat launching pad to launch Endtime Ministries. So it was pretty neat at that time.
And ultimately, he was willing to be led by the Spirit of God, because this was God prompting him to study, and then would reveal things to him. And as far as we had already mentioned the magazine, when he felt God pressing him to do this magazine. I remember him saying, I'm going to do a prophecy magazine. I'm going to do a prophecy magazine. I've heard, you know, several times over and over, he would say, God's dealing with me to do a prophecy magazine.
Right.
Well, he'd never done a magazine. He didn't know what he was doing. But he had a zeal, he had a passion, he was led by the Spirit, he was led by God, and he presented this idea to this board of men, these 10 men, and he told them about his vision and his goal to get the word out to people in the world about the current world events and how they relate to Bible prophecy. And he went before them, he told them his vision, they all backed him and said, you know, that sounds like an awesome idea. To get you started, we're going to each pledge you $1,000. Well, he's like, awesome. So then at that time, he was still traveling around, telling people about the prophecies of the Bible, pushing his book, and then he started taking money for subscriptions to the magazine. So for one whole year, he signed people up at $14.95 for 12-issue subscription, and over a period of a year, he got 1,000 people. Well, during that same year, the 10 men that had pledged, hey, we're going to help you get this off the ground, none of them came through for him. So he thought, I guess it's not meant to be. I only have 1,000 subscriptions. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I need to go to the Lord in prayer. So he prayed and told God. He said, I know you've been dealing with me to do this magazine, and I went around trying to get subscribers, and I got 1,000 people to sign up. But none of the men that said they were willing to back me even has come through. And he said it was like God spoke to him and said, are you willing to stand before me on Judgment Day and say you weren't willing to do what I've asked you to do?
Right.
And then, or do you just want to play it safe?
Right.
Are you willing to do that? And he said, well, God, when you put it that way, I'm not willing to do that. So he got up, he went and talked to my mom, and they decided, okay, we're going to do this. We'll go this much in hock before we shut everything down and just pay our way out.
Right.
And so that's the way he has always ran this. That's his spirit-led part of him. And so when he did that, he got up. After the conversation with my mother, he went to the post office. He went and opened the mailbox. And inside the post office was one of the 10 men writing him a letter apologizing, sorry I have been a full year not getting back to you, and gave him the $1,000. So it's just, you know, it's emotional because I was there. I saw it. I saw his faith, and he depended on God.
Right.
And God has always led him, and it's never been wrong.
Right. And so that was the beginning of Endtime Magazine. And it
Yes.
almost didn't happen.
That's right. Almost didn't happen.
But because Irvin Baxter was led by the Spirit of God, and God came through, God did not let him down.
Nope.
He had all those subscriptions already sold, and God came through, and he decides, oh man, God, do you want me to do this or not? He goes to the mailbox, and there's $1,000 from one of the original men. So it's an awesome testimony. It's an awesome miracle that God did, letting know one single man in Richmond, Indiana, I've got my eyes upon you, Irvin Baxter, and I'm going to help you every step of the way, but you're going to depend on me.
Yeah.
It's not going to be your intellect. It's not going to be how much money do I have in setback. It's not going to be that. It's going to be, you're going to be led by the Spirit of God, and I'm going to take you through. And so, that, of course, we know, you and I both know, that that's how God has done all along the way. And that's why we have these miracles to show to people, because if you don't ever if you don't ever take a step of faith, you'll never get a miracle. Right. God's going to perform a miracle when you say, God, you told me to do this. I'm going to take that step of faith. God performs the miracle. You can look back and tell everybody years later, look what God did for me. Yeah. And so it's such an awesome testimony. And so we have that was in 1991. We started Endtime Magazine, or Irvin Baxter did, and we started selling mags after that. And then comes the creation of Understanding the End Time in 1994. So give me just a little background on that, because what we're doing, remember, we're introducing people to Endtime Ministries. And if people out that watch us on the radio, watch us on TV, listen to us on the radio and different things, if they don't have all this background, it could just be a voice on the radio.
Right.
But once they know, look at all the miracles God has done for this ministry over the years. These guys are endeavoring with everything that's within them to be led by the Spirit of God. Guys and gals, we're led by the Spirit of God here. Right. We pray and every morning we have prayer and devotions. And that's how we're leading our lives. And that's a testimony to individuals on how we're going to make it through the end time.
Right.
We're going to be led by the Spirit of God, just like we have since the beginning of this ministry. And so that's really the key message today and in our story, is being led by the Spirit of God. So after the creation of the magazine in 91, we jump forward to 94, and we have the creation of Understanding the End Time. So give me just a little background on that as well.
That was Understanding the End Time. It was called Understanding the End Time Level 1. Mm-hmm. It was 10 lessons, and he created it. We created a 15 by 20 flip chart, mm-hmm. which I brought a sample of. These are no longer available, mm-hmm. but I have one.
Yeah, we're not selling these today, by the
way. I have one. It's a 15 by 20, 4-color, fully laminated flip chart. Mm-hmm. And we created these 10 lessons to teach people the prophecies of the Bible and how they relate to the current world events. Well, one day, he decided that we needed a new computer to lay out our magazine with. Mm-hmm. And so he looked in one of those papers that's like a little trader. You can buy used things from people. And he told me that there was a guy in Indianapolis named, well, we didn't know his name, but there was a man in Indianapolis that had a computer and he wanted to go check it out. Mm-hmm. So we got in the car and we drove an hour away and went to see this man. Well, we went there for an Apple computer, but 6 hours later, we were there. We were like the Jesus at the woman at the well. He went there for a drink of water, and she ended up getting a whole lot more than that.
Right.
So John Linker, 6 hours later, was hooked. And he was a graphic design artist. My dad started telling him all these things about the modern nations in the Bible and how these beasts rose up out of the sea in the book of Daniel, book of Revelation, and how the Bible says it was this and that, and the bear and the eagle's wings were plucked up, and he told John Linker all of these things in I think he put everything he knew in a 6-hour period, because it was just like he just kept telling this man all of this stuff. Well, it birthed.
That doesn't sound like your dad.
it birthed in John Linker.
Yeah.
A passion to want to do this flip chart for us.
Right.
So that was the start of our journey, and so over a period of a year we created a 10-lesson series that was actually the foundational teaching of this ministry, which has now evolved into the 14-lesson DVD series that we have,
Yep.
the Understanding the End Time.
Now you can purchase that.
You can purchase
Not the
this.
chart,
The
yeah.
flip chart is not available, but that was what birthed it. And then John Linker started creating these crazy beasts, and then we had this product, and we started to be able to teach people. Mm-hmm. And then we created the VHS series. Mm-hmm. And so that was the launch, the birth of the Understanding the End Time. That has now evolved, and we've updated it over the years.
Sure. So that's what took us into the media world of VHS, DVD, and all these different things. So it was really a miraculous event, because those things have went all over the world. They've went places where we would never reach with radio or television. But we've got people taking those and teaching Bible studies. I deal with missionaries and different people all around the world that have taken those sets of DVDs and VHS early on and taught Bible studies. And I've had people call me from Australia, everywhere, and say, hey, I got saved as a result of this DVD series. That's probably, that's probably the most successful product we've ever created by far, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, and it was a divine inspiration by God.
And I remember back in that time that most people that participated in that flip chart because we had multiple people in the flip chart.
Yeah.
And I remember back then, it was like all hell broke loose on everyone's lives because we were being a part of something that was going to so dynamically help people and change things for people's lives that the enemy didn't want us to be able to produce it.
Right.
And it was a struggle, and it was like a year's struggle. It was a lot of stuff that happened in a year, and I couldn't remember it all if I wanted to, but it was an attack. But because it was going to be so effective and reach so many people and go around the world, now we know.
Yeah. You know, Jan, that's another thing that's been a key for me watching End Time over the years. I've seen Satan try to buck up against your dad and try to thwart what he's doing, but your dad just kept his head down, trusting in God, and God's taken him through everything that's come against him. And you know what that tells me? If he's done it all these years, that's why I'm not fearful. I know all of us live around here, we say we're not fearful. I'm not fearful for what's just ahead because I know how God's kept us through all the years that's behind us and all the different miracles and things that He's brought us through. So I don't get fearful when I look about from here to the second coming of Jesus Christ and all we're going to go through, because just as God's taken us through all of this, I know He's going to take us through all of that's just ahead, and that's how we're going to function in the end time.
Right.
There's no other way you're going to be able to function in the end time other than that. You can't just go live in a cave in Colorado or something like that. That's not going to work. You're going to be led by the Spirit of God, and that's how we function. If you know, or if you've ever met Irvin Baxter at all, heard him teach, he's a Spirit-led individual. And of course, all of that is filtered down to all of us. We've got our own relationships with God, and we're endeavoring to be Spirit-led individuals. And of course, we've got ways of helping people. It's not just us living that way. We've got ways of helping everybody out there be Spirit-led. So it's good to stay in contact with this ministry, really, because we can help you. We've got DVD series. The End Time University is to take people from being spiritual infants to spiritual maturity and help them be led by Spirit of God on their own, so that we don't sell DVDs just to make money. It's not a money-making venture. We know what's going to help people make it through the end times, and that's being led by the Spirit of God. So, so now once the DVDs are created, the chart and everything is set in motion, then it's time to dive off into media. And we look at the radio program. The radio program started, when did he go on radio in the beginning?
Well, our first day to be on radio was April 21st, 1998.
Okay.
But the precursor for that was in the year of 1997.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
He went to Houston for a conference. Pastor Mike Anderson, who's a cousin of ours, has a church in Houston, and he also would go and interview on TV. Well, the owner of the television station happened to be there the day that my dad did a whole lesson on modern nations in the Bible. Well, it caught the attention of Elder Thomas to the point where he was so intrigued by it, he invited him to come back the next day, and they even went to lunch together so he could further discuss it with him. Well, during this time, God had already been dealing with my dad. You need to start a radio show. You need to start a radio show. In his brain, he was thinking, if I started a daily radio show, I would be hooked to it with a ball and a chain.
Right.
And he said, I fought it. You know, my flesh, my flesh fought it. But he said the Lord just kept pressing him on it. Well, he went and had this conversation with Elder Thomas, and Elder Thomas said to him, Irvin, have you ever thought about having a prophecy talk show? And you know, my dad's radar was like, ding, 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 there it is.
Right.
And he said, well, the Lord's been putting His foot in my back all the time about it. And so they went ahead and had this conversation, and Elder Thomas said, well, I tell you what, I have one of the finest stations in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It's a 100,000 watt FM station. He said, when you're ready to go on radio, I'm going to allow you to have drive time, prime time, 3 to 4 on my station. And he said, it's not going to cost you anything. I'm going to help you get your start. I helped Marlon Maddox, and I'm going to help you get your start. So my dad was like, okay, but we didn't really understand everything it entailed, but it took us about a year. And at the time, right before we were going to go on the air, Elder passed away. Well, my dad was like, okay, what does this mean to the ministry? Does this mean we're still going to go? But Elder had made a phone call and expressed to his son, I want Irvin Baxter to be on drive time 3 to 4 every day on KVTT.
In Dallas.
In Dallas. And so that is really what was the birth of our daily radio talk show.
Right.
And so when we went on, there was a minuscule staff there. But when we went on, we didn't really know what to expect because we didn't know what we were doing either.
Right.
We were just trying to do.
We were following God, really, yeah.
And so I remember April 21st, 1996, or 1998, we started our, well, at that time it was Politics and Religion, but he started our radio show. And we started getting these phone calls, and people were like, who are you? We don't know. We've never heard of you.
Right.
We're like, oh, well, we're just a prophecy ministry and that teach you the prophecies of the Bible and how they relate to the current world events. And so that was just the start of it. And so it's just blossomed from there. And it was just, it's awesome because Dallas has always been like our flagship area.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, that's probably why God pulled us down here from little old Richmond, Indiana to the Dallas-Fort Worth
Probably
Metroplex.
so.
And we'll get into that later on in the program, but I know we're coming up to a break here, and really, Jan, the reason I wanted to do this program, and I think it was inspired by God, because we talked about this, doing it a few days ago. Let's tell everybody the story about End Time. We go into our management meeting this morning, and we watch a Dave Ramsey video to help us manage End Time better. And he talks about telling everybody your story. Make sure everybody knows how you got where you're at. And we're sitting here looking at each other and texting going, oh my goodness, we're fixing to do this on the radio in just a few hours. And I believe it was a divinely inspired program. And so that's why I'm thankful for that, and to let everybody know the inside workings and the miracles that God has done through your dad and through all of us, really. It's been a big team effort. And I wanted to share that with everybody today. A miraculous, spirit-led entity from the beginning, and we're going to finish it throughout the rest of the program. We're going to take everybody and show them the story of End Time.
From here to Armageddon, breaking prophetic fulfillments, America's God-given destiny. With topics such as these, you won't want to miss upcoming End Time prophecy conferences.
Irvin Baxter will be traveling to many cities where he'll be teaching these exciting lessons.
To those of you in Lexington, Kentucky, Houston and Murphy, Texas, and Shreveport, Louisiana, we'll be heading your way soon.
Come meet our End Time team and other people like you who want to learn what God has in store in the days ahead. View our wide selection of prophecy materials and take End Time lessons home to share with family and friends.
We hope you'll come and be encouraged, gaining new understanding as prophecy continues to unfold.
Go to endtime.com and under events, click the conference link or call 1-800-ENDTIME to find more details about these conferences.
The world is entering a time of more prophetic fulfillments than any other time in mankind's history. Israel and the city of Jerusalem will be the epicenter of these fulfillments. The scripture tells us that the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. We, along with Israel, need to understand the times so we, the end time generation, know what to do. That understanding is contained in this lesson, Israel's future according to Bible prophecy. Get this lesson by calling 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to continue to listen to today's broadcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And we're telling you the story today. It's a special program today. We're telling you the story of End Time. How did End Time begin? All of the different miracles and really filling in the gaps. If you just watch us on TV, you listen to us on the radio, you go to the web, you don't get the background of how End Time got from the beginning to where we're at now. And it really helps to add credibility to the ministry, really, because you can see the miracles that God has performed for the ministry over the years, and how important it is that it helps us know that in the times just ahead between now and the second coming, I don't have to fear. We don't operate by fear. The Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and of a sound mind. one of the ways he does that is I look back at the testimony and all of the miracles that we've had all the years, and I know if God's taken me through all of that, I know He'll take us the rest of the way. So I don't fear. The Bible says all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, and we've truly seen that over the years. So my co-host today is my lovely wife, Jana Robbins, Irvin's daughter, and you're kind of filling in the gaps. Like I said, I did this 3 or 4 months ago, and I hit the treetop version of our miracles. But since you have been here since pretty much the beginning, the magazine was published in 91, you started in 92. So who better, besides Irvin himself, to fill in the gaps of all of the miracles and all the many things God has done to us? And of course, you know, Jan, if we spent 20 programs on this, we couldn't tell everything.
Right.
But in doing so, let's continue on with the story that God has really formed in all of our lives over the years in pulling us together as this big team to accomplish what He wants to do before His second coming. So we went on the radio in 98, and then a miraculous event happened. We have our first conference. So tell me about that.
We had a man from the Dallas area call and ask my dad if he would come. I guess he had been getting some phone calls about our prophecy show that was here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and wanted to know if my dad would come to his church and do a seminar. My dad was like, well, I don't really know what kind of following I have there in Dallas. He said, I think we're getting good response, but how many does your church seat? And the gentleman said, well, 200. My dad was like, I don't think that would be enough. He goes, well, let me check into a few things and we'll see. Well, ultimately, he rented the Brookhaven College auditorium that seated 700. So November of 1998, we came here to the Dallas area. It was me, my dad, and my 5-year-old daughter, Holly. We came here to the conference. We did not know what we were getting into. We had boxes of product with us for me to set up a table and sell. So we get there at about 5 o'clock in the evening. My dad goes to get his PowerPoint or whatever he had. I can't remember what it was back then, but I just remember he went somewhere to get things set up, while Holly and I were back at this table to get things unloaded and put up on a table. Well, we couldn't even get our boxes open. People were standing waiting for us to even open our box so they could dive in and get something from our ministry. It was so amazing. We'd never even seen nothing like it. So we got everything on the table, and they started pouring in, and they started pouring in. And it was like 2 hours before start. And I think an hour before the seminar was supposed to even start, the conference was supposed to start, the auditorium was full. People were standing room only in the auditorium. The outside foyer where we were set up to sell the product was people from the table. By the time the thing started, there was people from the table all the way back to the back wall, to both sides, and up some steps that were on either side. And it was so packed that the fire marshal came and locked our doors and said, well, I don't know what exactly they did. They just wouldn't let anybody in. Right. And said no more people can come in here, and KVTT had to get on the radio and tell everybody, if you are going to the End Time Prophecy Conference tonight at the Brookhaven College, you will have to turn around. And they turned away 500 cars. Wow. And we had no clue. Well, the next 5 hours, I was like in an aberration because I don't even remember. It was an out-of-body experience. I sat there and was selling DVDs and books and magazines to people for 5 hours. Yeah. And at the end of the 5 hours, I think we sold like $15,000 just in product. And we were like, whoa, we had never experienced, because again, we didn't really know. Right. And so that was just like one of those moments of the ministry. You just knew, whoa, something shifted. And so
we've got the tail of a tiger here.
Yeah, well, here I was doing child labor. I had my little 5-year-old girl bagging up stuff to try to help facilitate these people buying product at our first prophecy conference, which was way cool.
Don't tell everybody we're using child labor.
That was back then.
Okay, yeah. That's years ago, folks. We're not using child labor. So once the first conference in Dallas, of course, we've done thousands of conferences since then, and God has really blessed us in doing that. But then there comes a time, we went forward a few years. Your dad was pastoring a church at that time. We were in Richmond, Indiana. We had we were on the radio program up there. Our radio studio was there. But then there comes a time when your dad receives a call from a minister in Dallas, and then God's fixing to rock our world
Yes.
at Endtime Ministries. So what happens as a result of that phone call?
Well, he called my dad and said, I really feel like that God's been speaking to me that you need to move Endtime Ministries to Dallas, Texas, and partner with our church, and together we can partner together and win the world,
Sure.
to reach the world. And my dad was like, well, if God spoke to you, he has to speak to me too. I don't just go on that.
Right.
And so he started seeking God's face. Well, over a period of a year or two, it ended up that he did end up giving his church up of 33 years, and he moved 7 families to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in 2005. And so that alone was like a miracle, just to be able to take that many people with us and come here to move and be in the will of God, which ultimately we have seen it was the perfect will of God for this ministry. So that's how sort of it happened.
And God showed me, really myself personally, that we were in the will of God as we remodeled the first building we came to, and miracle after miracle happened during that. I had, one time I was just about ready to build a bunch of walls and totally construct the interior of that building, and I walked in by myself that morning. I didn't have anybody hired because we really couldn't afford it. Walked in by myself, and I saw all that lumber sitting there, just stacks of lumber, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to do all this by myself. It's going to take me forever. And a guy, I went to make a pot of coffee. I come back through, and a guy was standing at the front door. I let him in, and I said, can I help you? And he said, yeah, I heard you need some help here. Irvin's been talking on the radio. He said, and I said, well, what can you do? And he said, I'm a home builder, and I was just thinking, God, I don't know, I'm all alone here. I don't know, how am I ever going to get this done? And I had a home builder showed up, and we flew through that. And it was just one thing after another in the first building we moved into. And then we thought, you know what, because we crammed 8,500 square feet into a 5,000 square foot building. So, I mean, we downsized. Everybody was just basically had to give each other piggybacks around the office to try to fit in there. But then we thought, you know what, we've got to expand a little bit. And tell me what happened, a personal experience in your life that God showed you we were in the will of God and maybe making a move.
We had just moved down here. We hadn't been here more than 3 or 4 months. And we had a partner call. She was from here in this area, and she said, I want to come over to the office one day and volunteer for a few hours. And so she came. Well, one of the jobs that we needed done that had been put on the back burner was my dad has so many books, and all of the books needed organized and put into shelving, and so that's what she did. So she just was doing that. So we decided to go get some lunch. So we went up, we were coming up George Bush Turnpike on the service road, and we come by this building where we're sitting today, and I said to her, Deborah, that building right there, my dad would love for Endtime Ministries to be there right on the George Bush Highway, and we can be an evangelism center, and people can come here for studies, and he just thought it would be an awesome spot. Well, she goes, well, let's just drive around it and pray over it. So we drove around it 7 times, like they did when Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, 7 times around the walls. And we drove around this building 7 times and prayed over it. Well, it didn't happen then, but ultimately, we had decided we had to do something. And so our board of advisors had come into town, and we went to a place out in Carrollton that was called the TWL building. And we were flirting. They were getting ready to try to liquidate that building. And we were flirting with the idea of maybe trying to buy that building. Well,
now, this was a year and a half later.
Yes, this was a year and a half later.
So we had forgot all about this building that you guys prayed over.
Right. And so the TWL building, when they were there, we were in a board meeting. They're in the TWL building, and we were talking, and they were saying, the pros and cons of buying this building, we just don't know if it's good or not, because there's a lot to it, and it's away from places and that kind of thing. Well, somebody piped up. I don't even remember who it was, and they said, well, you know, there is a building that Brother Baxter at one point had looked at and really wanted Endtime. Well, one of the more aggressive guys says, well, let's go look at it. We hop up right then and there. We go straight down we find the owner of the building and we go look at it. Well, it was for sale, but it was also for lease. Endtime Ministries could not buy it at that time. But God worked it out so that we got a really great lease. And when we had first come through here and looked at it, the owner had actually apologized for where we're sitting today. He said, you know, the guy that originally built this building in '99 built this area for a TV studio. I am so sorry, it's a waste of space. And my dad's thinking, waste of space? Yeah. That's not a waste of space
exactly
to
what
him.
We need.
So we just knew. Well, then we ended up leasing and ultimately buying this building, which to me is a miracle. And so it's just one more thing that God has done and led us on, and we followed. So
yeah, it was a miraculous event, and we bought this building with a television studio because God was dealing with your dad to go on TV. So then we get the building and we remodel the whole thing. We built a television studio here, but we weren't on TV. We had sunk a lot of money in here, taking steps of faith. And now I remember, well, I'll let you tell the story, but I remember sitting in the management meeting thinking, how in the world, now we got the television studio, how in the world do we break into television? The television world. So tell me a little bit about that. You remember being in the meeting as well.
Well, before that though, I remember when we had built the studio and sunk so much money into it that we didn't even have our camera equipment to be able to do a program. And so my dad, being led by the Spirit, he just knew that God had told him he was supposed to go on TV. And so he put his faith in God and took a step of faith, did it anyway. It was hard. We all felt it, but it was a God thing showing us, hey, you put your trust in me, I will take care of everything. So ultimately we did get the cameras. We were in that management meeting that day when we said we absolutely have to get on TV. We had originally got on a TV station or TV network prior in August of '09, and then after 2 months decided it wasn't for us. And so this was the summer of 2010. We said we've got to get on here, but we had all of the doors had been closed up to that point.
What we'll do, as we tell the miracle of how God put us on TV, I know we're coming up to a break here, and I apologize for breaking in on you, but I also want to let everybody know that the reason for this program today, to telling you our story, is to let you know that in knowing what's the turbulent times that are just ahead, that God can keep us through, all of us, everybody listening to us, if we're led by the Spirit of God. And if you don't know what that's all about, go on our website, call the ministry, and we can help you out with that. And when we get back, we'll continue on.
In the space of just 1 week in Paris, France, 8 synagogues were attacked. One was firebombed by a 400-strong mob. Additionally, a kosher supermarket and pharmacy were smashed and looted. The crowds chanted, "Death to the Jews." One banner at the demonstrations read, "Israel, hell." There's some more evidence concerning the Great Tribulation and the fact that we actually have entered into the prelude to the Great Tribulation. One person said it's like the 1930s all over again.
Go to endtime.com and under Irvin's Thoughts, click the Great Tribulation to watch this video.
Welcome back, everybody, and we're telling the story today. It's been a special program, and Jan, I really wish we had 2 hours to do this, or really even 3 hours, because we're just hitting the treetops. We've got so many miracles, but in continuing on down the story of end time, God brought us from Richmond, Indiana to Texas. He brings us to this building that you and I are both currently sitting in. We got the television studio built, and then we go to make a move to go on TV. And tell us the story about that. And we've got so many miracles left, so we're really going to have to start clipping along here to try to get most of it done. Okay. So tell me about television real quick.
We were in a meeting. We said we wanted to be on a major network, several major networks here. And we had tried to get on to several times, different avenues, but every time we'd have the door shut in our face. So we just decided, okay, collectively as a management team, we're going to pray about it and ask God to open the door. Well, we prayed on like a Thursday or Friday. The next Tuesday or Wednesday, we get a phone call from the very network that we had prayed about, the program director wanting my dad to come there and be on a special show.
Yeah.
Well, that was just God altogether, because he just opened the door wide. And that was July of 2010 when we launched us being on major networks, and it's just grown since then. So it was a major miracle just right there, just saying a simple prayer. We get the phone call after having all the doors slammed.
And you just don't get those major phone calls. We're talking about the largest Christian network in the world.
That's right.
And we were sitting back in the meeting talking just a few days before thinking, we don't even know who to call.
That's right.
A couple days later, we get a phone call and say, hey, the owner of this network would like to have you out, and then the rest is history. So it was God saying, look, I brought you this far. I'm not going to let you down, and I'm going to take you the rest of the way. And we've seen this time after time after time. And then once we go on TV, God lays another, now these are huge leaps of faith. God lays another entity that he wants Irvin Baxter to start, and that was the Jerusalem Prophecy College. So give me a little history behind that.
Well, back in 1998, my dad was flying to Israel, and he was talking to God like he does, and said, God, all this stuff's getting ready to happen to the Jewish people, and who is going to warn them? Who's going to tell these people about this? God spoke to him and was like, you are. Who better to tell them than you?
Exactly.
Well, my dad's always up for the challenge, so he started raising the funds to mail a magazine to every home in the West Bank. And this was in 1998, which ultimately we did. September, October of 1998, we sent a magazine to every home in the West Bank. That was the birth of the beginning of it. However, you can't really instruct people if you're not there and you don't get ingrained in the daily life.
Boots on the ground, right.
And so God started giving him a burden and a vision for something called the Jerusalem Prophecy College. This was back in 2012. Well, he also knew that took a lot of money, and we didn't really have the money for that certain project. So he prayed and he sought God. He started raising the money, and over a period of a year, we raised about $80,000 on it. Well, when we checked into property, just to get a 4,500 square foot area of property, not even a standalone building in Jerusalem, is $1 million. Well, we didn't have that. But he knew that God was pressing him on it. Being spirit-led one more time. And so he got down to pray. It was right out here in our daily devotions. He got down to pray, and he said, God, I know you've told me to do this Jerusalem Prophecy College, but I don't have the funds for it, and I don't really know how to raise the money to get it. And he said, God spoke to him that day vividly and told him, he said, I want you to create a lesson and a program called Another Jewish Holocaust Ahead. And he said, and this is what you're going to say. And he just started boom, 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 just typing on his computer right there in prayer, God giving him that stuff as he was typing. He created that program. I was part of all of this. I saw this whole thing go down. And he created that program, and the editors edited the DVD. We sent it to the networks. It aired Labor Day weekend of 2013, which was the first part of September 2013. At that point, I had a little notepad where I was keeping track every day of the tallies coming in. I have that notepad in my file, and I saw it with my own eyes as writing that figure down on that notepad. It said every day, it was like manna from heaven. It was awesome, because it was like God wanted this so much that he was creating our own little modern day miracle out of the book of Acts.
Exactly.
And so it was like, in 19 days, we raised $1 million off of one idea that God gave my dad, and he incorporated it. And from the time he gave the idea to the time we accomplished our goal, it was less than 2 months. And so that is what launched the JPC. And then in turn, it was the same concept with the renovations. We needed $500,000 to do renovations. God gave him another idea. He did that again, and God supplied the need. And so again, it was spirit-led and a miracle.
And then once we do that, though, we get everything, all these balls in the air, and we're really moving. We're doing television, radio. We're producing a bi-monthly magazine, and the Jerusalem Prophecy College. We get it up, we get it remodeled, and then we hit a bump in the road.
Yes.
And we know God's had His hand upon Irvin Baxter all these years, so many miraculous events, and then the bump in the road happens, and we're sitting there going, hold on a second. But we know in the back of our mind, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, and we've followed God all these years, and so we know that the end is not here. So what happens? What happened to your dad?
July of 2014, he went and had a physical, and they found some blockage in his heart. They went in to do stents, couldn't do stents, recommended open heart surgery. But he had 2 or 3 conferences he felt he had to do. So against the doctor's wishes, he decided to go ahead and do the conferences. Well, he went home, and the next day he had a heart attack, and we almost lost him. But the ambulance came and got him. They took him to the hospital. Ended up being that he had to have a 6 bypass. But, you know, even through the 7 or 8 hour surgery that we sat in that waiting room, waiting and waiting and waiting forever, not knowing, it was like we had a peace. Even though it was a little scary, we still had a peace because we knew all of the things that had occurred up to this point and God was getting His ministry ready for, that wasn't His time to go. Unless we were really full, but we didn't think that we were. So God brought him through it. He's doing great, and here we are.
You know, actually, I've thought that God might not have given him an overhaul just to make it so he can make it another 10, 15, or 20 years till God comes back, because he may have been starting to slow down at that point, but now he's like a 50-year-old again. And so I know he's going to make it to the end, and God's got His hands upon him. So, and we're thankful to God. I tell you, thank you, Lord Jesus, today for that miracle, because I've seen that happen. How God's kept His hands upon him. Then we go to a couple different efforts that God laid on our heart to help the Jewish people in Israel. Because when we say this is Endtime Ministries, we actually mean the ministry part. None of us are getting rich off of this, I promise. So consequently, the efforts in Israel to help the Jewish people, a lot of people have seen that and recognized, wow, they actually do give money to Israel, a lot of money, and are trying to help the Jewish people. So what are the 2 of the efforts? I know the first one would be the Rambam Hospital. Give me a little history behind that.
Okay, the Rambam Hospital is a hospital that my dad read about. I believe it was the Jerusalem Post. There was a little clipping one time he saw that said, newly built underground hospital, Haifa, Israel, like the largest one in the world. And so he says to me, I'm director of the tours, and he says to me, we need to check that out and see if we can go take a tour of that. So we emailed and inquired, and we arranged to take our group the next time we were in Israel. And so at that point, then we started partnering with them to help them buy beds for the hospital, which it is an amazing place. They have great cutting edge technology, cutting edge medical people, and so that my dad actually named it Armageddon Hospital. We don't tell them that, but we say it. And so it's right there in the heart of where the UN armies are going to invade Israel, going to come down through the Kidron Valley, or to get to the Kidron Valley, but come down through the Plain of Megiddo, and it sits right up there in the northern part. So we partner with them, and we also partner with something called the Jewish Agency. Which
tell me about the Jewish Agency.
That's the agency that is helping Jews get reestablished in the nation of Israel. And they can bring them there, get them housed for 3 months and trained to go back into the culture of the Jewish people for $1,000 per person with the help of the government. So we have really endeavored to try to partner with them and to help, because we do have a burden for the Jewish people, and we feel like that that's just something it's going to be until the Lord comes back. And between the JPC, the relations with Rambam, and the relations with the Jewish Agency.
Well, it's very key, because when your dad went over there to establish the relationship with the lady who works with Christians and people who want to help the Jewish Agency bring people back, your dad went over there and met with her, and he went to their headquarters, and she told your dad, she said, "You're the first Christian individual that's been able to come to this, the hub, where they take the phone calls of people, of Jews around the world wanting to make Aliyah or come back to Israel. Your dad was the first Christian minister that ever got to go there. Right. And so he's sitting there with goosebumps thinking, God, you're right here with me. You've called us to do that. And that's another key point, Jan. A lot of the prophecies in the Bible revolve around Israel. We know that. A lot of the end time prophecy revolves right around Israel, the Battle of Armageddon, all of the different things, the rebuilding of the third temple. And God has laid it especially on our heart. We love Israel. We love the Jewish people. And we are actually, when we say ministry, we actually are helping them.
Right.
And God has given us some miraculous inroads to help those people in the end time. We've got great things just ahead. There's great revival just ahead. We know that according to the prophecies of the Bible. But we know that there's great revival prophesied for Israel and the people of Israel. Right. God said, I'll save the people of Judah first before His second coming. And of course, that's the people that are living out in the West Bank. So there's great things coming just ahead. But I just wanted to, just before we come to the end of the program, you're the tour director for Endtime Ministries. That's one of your main roles. Every year we take 2 humongous tours to Israel. And I wanted you just to tell a little bit about that. We've got about 90 seconds left here.
Okay.
Tell about our tour to Israel every year.
Well, I feel like our tour is the best there is. I mean, I know that may sound biased, but I feel like that we've taken, my dad has went to Israel since '93, and he has taken the best of the best. We have created a what I call a boutique tour, and if a person can only go to Israel one time in their life, we have taken everything you need to see in one trip and compiled it. Now, you may be tired at the end of the day, but I'm telling you, if you go with us to Israel, it is worth the money. And don't let the media tell you it's unsafe to go to Israel. There's 30 stabbings in Israel. There's 30 murders every weekend in Chicago. You go over there, you don't feel unsafe. Right. We ask people that go with us every year, do you feel unsafe? And they say, absolutely not. It was crazy. But this Israel tour that we're getting ready to take is October the 27th through November the 7th, and it is an amazing trip. We have an awesome itinerary planned out. I'm holding up a little brochure here we have going, and if you would be interested in maybe going with us to Israel, please contact us here at 1-800-END-TIME and ask to speak to Holly at extension 112, and she will help you with all the details. Yeah. Well, Jan, thank you for being with me on the program today. And because I want to let everybody know, a Spirit-led entity, so many miracles over the years, and that's the way we're going to function in the end time. Spirit-led individuals following God.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.